She was driving her own car through a quiet, rich neighborhood, confident, proud, and just promoted to the state's top legal position. But when blue lights flashed behind her and a cold voice demanded she prove she belonged, she realized this wasn't just a traffic stop. It was the start of a battle that would shake the very system she was hired to reform. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The afternoon sun painted golden stripes across the smooth black hood of Zara Nasir's car as she drove through the calm streets of Lennington Heights, an area known for its spotless lawns, white picket fences, and quiet gates that opened only to a certain kind of welcome. She had just finished a long but inspiring meeting at City Hall and was reflecting on what lay ahead. Today, she had finally shared her proposal for reforming police conduct, a cause close to her heart. Zara, recently appointed as the state's chief legal officer, was no stranger to uphill battles. As a child of two teachers who had worked tirelessly for their community, she had learned early that fairness didn't always come easy. She had spent her life studying, preparing, and refusing to back down. Her new position wasn't just a title, it was a promise she made to herself. To stand for those who were never given the chance to speak. Her fingers lightly tapped the steering wheel as she thought about the speech she would give at next week's press event. She was going to make bold recommendations, more accountability for unjust stops, community-led training, and most importantly, justice rooted in respect. She barely noticed the blue lights until they filled the rearview mirror. Sirens followed, a second later. Zara's brows furrowed. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't broken any rules. Still, she slowed down and carefully pulled over. She sat quietly, heart beating faster, even though her hands hadn't done anything wrong. Her breath deepened. A police car rolled to a stop behind her, and a tall officer stepped out. He walked with firm, rehearsed steps, adjusting his belt and removing his sunglasses. His name tag read Brandt. His expression was flat, but his eyes were sharp and judging. Zara rolled down her window and waited. "License and registration," Brandt said, not as a greeting, but as a command. She handed them over calmly. "Here you go, officer." Brandt took the documents, but his gaze didn't follow them. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on her face, then scanned the interior of the car. He looked back at her, his jaw tight. "Whose car is this?" he asked. Zara raised her chin slightly. "Mine." "This vehicle?" Brandt asked again, lifting his brow with doubt. "Yes," she replied with calm. He flipped through her documents, not reading them, then tossed them onto the passenger seat. "Step out of the car." Zara hesitated. "Is there a problem?" "Step out," he repeated. She moved slowly, keeping her hands visible. She had learned this long ago. No sudden moves, no raised voice, no emotion that could be misunderstood. Standing by the side of the road, Zara felt exposed. The houses nearby had tall windows, and behind the curtains she imagined eyes watching. Brandt walked around her car, opening doors, checking the back seat. Without asking, he popped the glove box open again and rifled through it. He pulled out papers, notebooks, a pair of sunglasses. "You seem awfully confident," he muttered. "Because I know I've done nothing wrong," she answered. He laughed under his breath. "We got a report about a car like this involved in suspicious activity." "I see," Zara said softly. Brandt wasn't listening. He bent down, pulled up the floor mats, opened her purse, and dumped its contents onto the hood of the car. Lip balm rolled off the side, business cards scattered in the wind. A man walking his dog stopped on the sidewalk. A woman pushing a stroller slowed down. Their eyes landed on the scene, unsure whether to intervene or just observe. Zara felt the sting in her chest, not from fear, but from humiliation. "This is unnecessary," she said, voice low but steady. "What's unnecessary?" Brandt snapped. "Is people thinking they can buy cars like this and expect no questions?" "I'm being fully cooperative," Zara replied, her voice sharper now. Brandt walked to his car, spoke into his radio. Zara heard him call for backup. He mentioned a possible arrest. Her hands were clenched at her sides, but her face stayed calm. She took out her phone and made a quick call, whispering a few words into the receiver before hanging up. Brant looked over. "Oh sure, call your friend," he said with a sarcastic grin. "It won't help." Zara met his eyes. "Maybe not, but I'm ready now." Brant motioned for her to get into his cruiser. She obeyed without argument, sliding into the back seat, as if she were just another suspect. As the car rolled forward, passing the same streets she had driven down minutes ago, Zara stared out the window. The same trees, the same porches. But now everything felt different. This wasn't just a wrong stop. This was a system showing its teeth again. But Zara wasn't afraid. She had walked into courts filled with doubt before. She had spoken truth in rooms that wanted silence. And now, in the back of this car, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Not as a victim, but as a witness. And very soon, everyone would know who she was. The walls of the station were dull and gray, lit by buzzing lights that gave off more flicker than warmth. Zara sat quietly in the small, cold room where Officer Brant had placed her. The chair under her was stiff metal. The table in front of her was scratched and stained, as if it had held too many stories like this one. Brant stood by the door, filling out a report with a pen that scratched loudly on the paper. He hadn't spoken since they arrived. Not a word of apology. Not a single question to reconsider what he had done. To him, this was just another stop. Another person to process. Another report to file. Zara sat with her hands folded on the table, her face calm, her heart steady. She knew how this looked, but she also knew something Brant didn't. And that moment of truth was coming fast. Outside the room, the station grew busier. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Quiet voices turned into whispers. Someone had arrived. Someone important. The door opened. Brant didn't turn around right away, but the tone in the air shifted. A tall man in a dark suit stepped in, followed by two other officers in dress uniforms. One of them was the station chief, his face unreadable, but tense. "Officer Brant," the chief said, sharp and direct. "Step outside with me, now." Brant looked confused, but obeyed. He left the room with the men, the door clicking shut behind him. Zara sat still, her eyes watching the dust float in the sunlight coming from the small window above. Moments passed. Then the door opened again. The chief returned, this time alone. "Miss Nasir," he said, correcting himself a beat later. "Chief Legal Officer Nasir, I believe we owe you an apology." Zara nodded slowly. "I believe you do." The chief looked down, his voice quieter now. "We weren't informed of your visit or position." Officer Brant acted without understanding the situation. "He didn't need to know my title," Zara replied. "What matters is how he treated me without it." The chief paused. There was nothing he could say to defend it. Zara stood, straightening her blouse. "I came here today to bring change to the department. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through truth. And today Officer Brant gave me a perfect example of what still needs to change." The chief exhaled slowly. "We'll take appropriate action. Immediately." Zara followed him out of the room. In the hallway, Brant was standing with the other officers. His arms were crossed, but his face was no longer smug. "You'll be suspended effective now," the chief said. "Pending a full investigation." Brant's jaw tensed. "For doing my job?" Zara turned to face him. "No. For doing your job with blind judgment. For treating someone like a criminal without reason. For forgetting that the badge you wear is meant to protect, not control." Brant didn't reply. His eyes met hers for the first time with confusion, maybe shame, maybe just shock. Zara nodded at the chief and left the building. Her heels clicked against the floor, echoing down the hallway like a final word. Outside, the sunlight felt brighter. Her car had already been returned to her. She got in without a word, without a glance back. But inside she wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was focused. Because now she knew that what she was fighting for wasn't just theory on paper. It was real, personal, alive. Back at her office, Zara sat at her desk. Her phone buzzed with messages, some of support, others of concern. A few reporters had already caught the news. She opened her laptop and began to type. A statement for the public. Not to shame Brandt, but to shine light on what had happened. We cannot fix a system by ignoring its cracks, she wrote. We must see them, name them, and then change them from the inside out. Hours later, as the news spread, people began to talk, not just about what happened to her, but about how she had handled it. Not with anger, not with hate, but with quiet. Power. In the silence of her office, Zara looked at her reflection in the dark computer screen. This was only the beginning. The rain tapped softly against the office window as Zara flipped through a thick stack of reports. It was early morning and most of her team hadn't arrived yet. But Zara had barely slept. Her thoughts kept returning to Officer Brandt. His actions still sat heavy in her chest, not just because of what he did to her, but because something about his behavior felt deeply familiar. One name on a report caught her eye. She leaned closer. The file described an old case from years ago. It involved a former officer who had been investigated for racial profiling, misuse of force, and intimidation. His name was Leon Brandt. Zara's hands paused. She knew that name. She opened the full report and scanned the details. Officer Leon Brandt had faced internal review more than once. Complaints from black drivers, young workers, and even children were all noted. Each case told a similar story: stops without cause, searches without reason, and a cold, unshakable arrogance. Zara remembered now. She had been a junior legal assistant when this file crossed her desk. Back then, she had no authority, no voice in decisions. The investigation had been shut down for lack of evidence. But even then, she had felt that something was wrong. And, now years later, the same attitude had returned in the shape of his son, Officer Noah Brandt. Zara sat back in her chair. The puzzle pieces were clear now. This wasn't just a single mistake. It was a cycle, a way of thinking passed from father to son, hidden under the mask of authority. Zara picked up her phone and called the archives department. I need everything. You can find on Officer Leon Brandt. Internal reviews, complaints, even dismissed reports. The woman on the other end didn't ask why. Everyone in the building had heard what happened last week. The request was processed quickly. Hours later, a thick envelope arrived. Zara opened it and read page after page, reliving stories of people who had been stopped, searched, and silenced. Some of the names were familiar. One stood out, a local shopkeeper named Amari, who had spoken up once, but no one had believed him. Zara made a decision. She needed to understand this legacy, and there was only one person who could give her answers. 2 days later, she visited a quiet care facility on the edge of the city. The front desk led her to a small room where Leon Brandt sat in a wheelchair, looking out at a gray garden. His hair was white now and his eyes looked tired but still sharp. He turned slowly when she entered. For a moment he didn't speak. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I know who you are, he said. Zara pulled a chair and sat beside him. I'm not here to argue, I'm here to understand. He laughed dry and low. Understand what? That the system's broken? It's always been broken. Some of us just knew how to live with it. Zara's voice was steady. Your son didn't just repeat your mistakes. He copied them. And this time someone saw it. Someone stopped it. Leon looked away. You think you can fix all this? I don't know if I can fix everything, she said, but I know silence doesn't help. He closed his eyes, breathing slow and deep. I taught him to follow the rules. My rules. I told him not to trust people who looked a certain way. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I just didn't know any other way. Zara stood to leave. He has a chance to be better, to break the cycle. I hope he takes it. Leon didn't respond. He kept his gaze on the window, lost in thoughts of choices made and lessons passed down like shadows. Later that evening, Zara received word that Noah Brandt had begun attending the department's reform training. At first, he sat at the back, arms crossed, silent. But during one session, a man named Amari stood and shared his story. The same man from the old file. He told the room how years ago he was accused of stealing his own tools from the shop he built with his bare hands. He had been shoved, questioned, and humiliated, and the man who did it was Leon Brandt. Amari didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just told the truth. Noah Brandt sat still, eyes wide, not looking away. For the first time, he wasn't wearing the mask of a badge. He was just a man facing the reflection of his own history. After the session, he didn't leave right away. He stayed behind, speaking quietly to a few other officers. He even approached Amari and shook his hand. It was awkward, unsure, but it was a start. Zara watched from a distance. She said nothing, but a small breath of hope filled her chest. Because sometimes the greatest change doesn't begin with speeches or power. It begins with the decision to listen. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of the city auditorium, casting soft rays over rows of chairs filled with officers, leaders, and members of the community. Quiet conversations buzzed through the space. People had gathered to hear about the changes that were coming, changes many never thought possible. Zara stood behind the stage curtain, holding a few notes in her hand. She didn't need to read them. The words lived inside her. They were the stories she had carried since the day she stepped into the legal system. Today wasn't about power. It was about purpose. At the back of the room, Noah Brandt sat quietly. He wasn't in uniform. His posture was less stiff than it used to be. Weeks of training, long conversations, and silent reflection had stripped away the walls he had built. Now, he was just a man trying to understand how to move forward. Zara stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. No microphones were needed. Her voice was strong, clear, and calm. "Thank you for being here," she began. "Today is not a celebration. It is a reminder that we cannot fix what we do not face." She paused, letting the words settle. "We speak of justice," she continued, "but justice is not loud. It is quiet. It's found in how we treat people when no one is watching, in the decisions we make when it's easier to walk away." The room listened. Some weeks ago, I was stopped by a police officer. It wasn't about my speed or a broken law. It was about the way I looked and the assumptions that came with it. But instead of getting angry, I made a promise to use that moment as fuel, not fire, to use it to create something better. Many nodded. Some looked down, ashamed, and some, like Noah, simply listened. Zara finished her speech with quiet strength. Change is slow, but every step matters, and the most powerful step is often the first one, to listen. As the crowd applauded, she stepped down from the stage. People came to greet her. Handshakes, hugs, words of thanks. Noah waited until most had left. Then, finally, he approached. Zara turned and met his eyes. "Chief Nasir," he said softly, "I want to thank you. Not just for what you said, but for what you did, for not giving up on someone like me." Zara studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You didn't give up on yourself either." "I almost did," he admitted. "For weeks I thought about what happened. At first I tried to blame everything, pressure, training, my past, but deep down, I knew it wasn't any of that. It was me, my choices, my silence. I learned how to act like my father, but I never learned how to see beyond the badge." Zara didn't smile, but her expression softened. "You're learning now," she said, "and that's what matters." Noah looked down. "I want to help, not just with the training, but with the outreach, the community programs, whatever you need. I don't want my mistake to be the end of my story." "Then let it be your beginning," Zara replied. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. The station started new policies, real ones, not just words on paper. Community voices were invited into meetings. Officers were held to higher standards, not with fear but with understanding. Noah became part of those efforts, not as a leader but as a learner. He joined programs with local youth, shared his journey, and listened to theirs. People were slow to trust him, but he didn't blame them. He just kept showing up. One Saturday morning, he stood next to Amari at the bike shop helping a boy fix a broken chain. Grease covered his hands, sweat clung to his brow, but for the first time in a long time he felt something close to peace. "You know," Amari said, handing him a wrench, "you could have just quit." "I thought about it," Noah admitted, "but you didn't. Because I wanted to be better," he said, tightening the bolt. "Not just different, better." Amari nodded. "Then you're already on your way." Meanwhile, Zara continued her mission with quiet determination. Every reform, every meeting, every difficult conversation was a step. Some days were harder than others. Progress was slow, but she never stopped. One evening, as she stood at her office window watching the city lights flicker, she thought about that day, sitting in the back of a police car, judged for nothing more than her presence. Now, that moment had become something powerful. Not just a memory of pain, but a turning point. She knew there would be more battles, more Brants, more doors that needed opening. But now, she wasn't alone, because someone had stayed to listen. And sometimes, that was where the real change began.